I remember the exact moment my world cracked open. It was a Saturday evening, our 7th wedding anniversary, and I was standing in the kitchen of the house we'd bought together 3 years ago, wearing the shirt Olivia had given me for my birthday, holding 2 glasses of Château Margaux I'd driven 40 minutes to buy from a specialty wine shop in Hartford. The babysitter, a college girl named Amber, was upstairs with our twins, Caleb and Lily, 5 years old and already asleep by 7:30. The reservation at Marcello's was for 8. I'd made it 6 weeks in advance. Olivia wasn't home. She hadn't called. Her last text, sent at 4:17 in the afternoon, said, "Leaving base soon, can't wait tonight," with a heart emoji. It was now 7:50. I'd already called twice. Both times it went to voicemail, the military crisp recording she'd set up when she made captain 2 years ago. "You've reached Captain Olivia Mercer. Leave a message." Captain Olivia Mercer. My wife. I set both wine glasses on the counter and sat down at the kitchen table. I wasn't panicking yet. I was doing the thing I always did with Olivia, making excuses, filling in the gaps with reasonable explanations, the way you fill a crack in a wall with plaster so you don't have to admit the whole structure is compromised. Traffic. Mandatory debrief. Her phone died. Something came up on base. She would walk through the door any minute, still in uniform, apologizing in that breathless way she had, and I would forgive her instantly, the way I always did, because that's what I'd always done. I thought about the first time I saw her. We'd met at a 4th of July party at my buddy Derek's place in Raleigh. She was standing by the pool in a white sundress, arguing passionately about defensive strategy with 2 guys twice her size, and she was winning. I fell for her completely in about 11 minutes. We dated long distance for 8 months while she finished her officer training, and I proposed at a rest stop on I-95 because she'd said once, laughing, that romance in inconvenient places was the most honest kind. She cried. I cried. The guy at the next pump started applauding. We built something real. Or so I believed. I supported her career with everything I had. When she got stationed at Fort Hadley, I uprooted my career as a structural engineer, took a remote consulting position that paid 30% less, and moved the twins to Connecticut, away from my family, my friends, my entire support network. I didn't complain. I managed daycare runs, pediatric appointments, school enrollment, grocery shopping, meal prep, bedtime routines, all of it, largely alone, because Olivia's schedule was demanding. I understood. I respected her service. I was proud of her. I told her that constantly. I gave her everything. And she couldn't make it home on our anniversary. At 8:20, I paid Amber, thanked her, walked her to her car. I came back inside, poured 1 glass of the Château Margaux, and sat on the couch in the living room in the dark. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat there, in the house I'd bought largely with my savings and a loan from my father, and I waited. She came home at 11:40. I heard the key in the lock. Heard her laugh, a real laugh, the kind she didn't use around me much anymore, loose and unguarded, and then a muffled male voice, and another laugh, and then the door opened and she stepped into the entryway still smiling before she saw me sitting there in the darkened living room and the smile froze on her face. Justin. Her voice landed wrong. Too controlled, too fast. Anniversary dinner was at 8, I said. My voice came out very calm. I hadn't planned that. She exhaled. Justin, I'm so sorry, things got out of hand on base, Lieutenant Greer was shipping out tomorrow, the whole unit wanted to give him a send-off, I couldn't just, who's outside? She hesitated. Half a second too long. Sergeant Donovan. He drove me. Why did Sergeant Donovan drive you home at midnight on our anniversary? Because I'd had a few drinks. Justin, please, I know this looks bad. I stood up. It looks bad, Olivia. It was a send-off. For a soldier who's deploying. That's not nothing, Justin. That matters. Something in my chest went cold. Our anniversary also matters. I know. She crossed her arms, and I recognized the posture, defensive, preparing for a position she'd already decided on. But I'm a captain. My people come first. That's the job. And there it was. The thing she'd been saying in different ways for 3 years, wrapped in different packaging, but always the same core message. Her people came first. The army came first. Her squad, her unit, her career, first. And me, Justin Mercer, the man who'd rebuilt his entire life around hers, who'd taken the lesser job and the longer commute and the sleepless nights and the empty side of the bed, I came after. Always after. You chose a bar over our anniversary, I said. Don't dress it up. Her jaw tightened. It wasn't a bar, it was a, I made reservations 6 weeks ago. I told you 3 times this week. You sent me a text at 4 saying you were excited. And then you chose to go drinking with your squad instead. I paused. Where did you go? Hallie's. On Route 7. I knew Hallie's. It was 15 minutes from our house. She had driven past our street to get there. That hit me like something physical. You drove past our house, I said. She didn't answer. And that silence, that particular silence, told me something I hadn't been looking for but couldn't unfind. I'd been asking the wrong questions. I stood very still. How long? I said. What? How long has it been going on with Donovan? She went white. Completely, instantly white, the color draining from her face the way it does when the body knows the lie has been caught before the mouth does. That's not, how long? Justin, nothing happened, do not. My voice cracked open and I let it, because the calm was gone now, burned through, and underneath it was something I hadn't felt since I was 17 and my father told me his first family had never stopped existing. Do not stand in our house and lie to me. I see it on your face. I see it right now. How long? She started to cry. And I recognized, with a sick, sinking certainty, that the tears weren't guilt or grief. They were strategy. Olivia cried strategically. I'd admired that quality once, in a courtroom sense. Now it made me want to walk out the front door and not come back. 8 months, she whispered. 8 months. I ran the math involuntarily. 8 months ago was last October. Caleb had broken his arm on the playground in October and I'd spent 6 hours in the ER with him while Olivia had been on base for a mandatory exercise. 8 months ago I had made her birthday dinner from scratch, lamb chops with rosemary reduction, her favorite, because she'd said she was too tired to go out. She'd come home at 10, kissed me on the cheek, eaten half a plate, and gone to bed early. His name is Donovan, I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. He was outside our house tonight. He was outside our house. I picked up my phone from the coffee table. Opened it. Pulled up the home security app, the camera system I'd installed 18 months ago after a rash of car break-ins in the neighborhood. I turned the phone toward her so she could see the footage timestamp. Donovan's truck was parked at our curb for 11 minutes. I could see her in the passenger seat. I could see, on the grainy but perfectly clear footage, the way she'd leaned across and kissed him before getting out. The sound she made was small. Cornered. How often? I asked. Justin, how often? I don't know. Maybe twice a week. Sometimes more. Twice a week. Sometimes more. For 8 months. I thought about all the times I'd been home with the twins while she was at PT or stuck in a briefing or doing a late equipment check. I thought about how I'd never questioned it because I trusted her. Because she was my wife. Because I believed, despite the distance and the loneliness and the slow erosion of us, that she was still fundamentally who I'd married. Does anyone else know? I asked. A few people from the unit. His wife. She flinched. He was married. Of course he was married. His wife, her name came to me later from mutual acquaintances, was named Renee, and she had a toddler and another baby on the way. You need to leave, I said. Justin, please, you need to leave this house tonight. Take your car. I'll have your things ready by Thursday. She stared at me. You can't throw me out of our home. It's my name on the deed, I said quietly. And my down payment. And my father's loan. So yes, I can. You can stay at a hotel or you can call Sergeant Donovan and see how welcome you are at his house. But you are not sleeping here tonight. She cried harder. She told me she loved me. She told me it had been a mistake, that she'd felt so alone on base, that I'd become distant, that I didn't understand the pressure she was under. Every word made me more certain than the last. I recognized what she was doing. She was reframing, reconstructing, building a narrative where her choices had reasons that were partially my fault. I'd watched her do it in professional contexts, when her unit made errors she needed to soften. She was doing it to me now. I walked upstairs. I checked on Caleb and Lily, both sleeping soundly, the night lights casting soft orange circles on their walls. I stood between their beds for a long moment, watching them breathe. Then I went to the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed, and called my brother Daniel in Phoenix. He answered on the second ring. She cheated, I said. 8 months. With a guy from her unit. There was a long silence. Then Daniel said, very quietly, "Tell me what you need." I told him I needed 2 days to think. He told me he was buying a flight for Friday. I told him I was okay. He told me he'd see me Friday. I got through that first night by not sleeping. I sat on the guest room floor with my back against the wall and I let myself feel it, the full, unfiltered weight of what had been done. She had taken 7 years of trust and she had lit them on fire while I was home making dinner and pouring wine. She had kissed another man outside this house. She had looked me in the eyes through 8 months of lies. She had let me believe I was the problem, too distant, not understanding enough, while she was the one who had detonated us. By 3 in the morning, grief had burned itself down to something else. Something quieter and much more deliberate. I wasn't going to fall apart. I didn't have that option. I had 2 5-year-olds asleep upstairs and they needed at least one parent who was functional. What I was going to do, I decided as the darkness outside the window began to thin toward gray, was be very, very thorough. I called my lawyer Monday morning. His name was Tom Greer, no relation to the deploying lieutenant, and he had handled my uncle's brutal divorce 4 years prior with what I could only describe as elegant devastation. I laid out everything. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he said, "First thing Monday, we freeze joint accounts. Second thing, we document the asset contributions for the property. Third, we establish primary custody grounds. This is solid, Justin. Don't say anything to her about legal action yet." I didn't. I went home Monday evening and acted normal, because normal was the tactical choice. Olivia was temporarily staying with a female colleague from base named Captain Bryce, and she was texting me with varying combinations of guilt and blame and pleading, which I responded to in short, neutral sentences. Meanwhile, Tom was filing the preliminary paperwork, and I was having coffee with Daniel, who had arrived Friday as promised, and building the foundation of what came next. Daniel had connections. He'd worked in HR for a defense contractor for 6 years before starting his own firm, and he knew how military conduct regulations operated. He sat across from me at my kitchen table with a legal pad and said, "An officer conducting an affair with an enlisted subordinate is a violation of Article 134, Justin. Fraternization. It's a real thing." I knew about Article 134. I hadn't gone there yet in my mind because I wasn't sure I wanted to use it. I sat with it for 2 days. Then I looked at the camera footage again, Donovan's truck, Olivia getting out, the kiss at our curb, and I thought about Renee, his pregnant wife, who didn't know. And I thought about my kids. And I thought about Olivia telling me her people came first. She'd picked her squad. So I picked mine. I printed the security camera footage. 12 pages of timestamps and stills, carefully organized. I drafted a formal complaint to the Inspector General's office at Fort Hadley, documenting the fraternization between Captain Olivia Mercer and Sergeant Ray Donovan. I'd learned his first name through the unit's public-facing roster online. I also included documentation of the relationship's timeline relative to my children's needs and my wife's stated obligations, for the family court proceedings Tom was building in parallel. The day before I filed the IG complaint, I called Renee Donovan. I got her number through Amber, who had a friend who knew someone in the unit, small communities, military towns. It was the hardest phone call I've ever made. She answered on the third ring and I told her I was Justin Mercer, that my wife was Captain Olivia Mercer, and that I had security footage and direct confirmation of an 8-month affair between her husband and my wife. She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. How long did you say? She whispered. 8 months, I said. I'm sorry, Renee. You deserve to know. She cried. I stayed on the line for 20 minutes while she processed it. Before she hung up she said, "Send me what you have." I sent her the footage. Then I filed the IG complaint. Then I called my realtor. The house had appreciated significantly in 3 years. We'd bought at 380 and comparable properties in the neighborhood were moving between 520 and 540. With Tom's guidance, I documented my down payment, my father's loan, and the disproportionate mortgage contribution from my income over 3 years. Olivia had contributed less than 30% of total payments due to her lower baseline salary and repeated voluntary purchases, a new car, extended gear, several solo trips she'd taken for mental health. The math told a clear story. Tom was confident about asset distribution. I listed the house on a Thursday. We had 4 offers by Sunday. We accepted one at $535 cash, $15,000 over asking. Olivia found out through her colleague Captain Bryce, who had seen it on Zillow. She called me 17 times in 2 hours. I answered on the 18th. You listed the house. Her voice was disbelief and fury and something crumbling underneath. I listed the house, I confirmed. You can't just. Tom filed the asset documentation with the court last week. The house is in my name, the down payment is documented, the contribution disparity is documented. The court is aware. Justin, we have children. You can't uproot. I'm not uprooting our children. I'm taking them home. Back to Phoenix, where my family is, where my support network is, where I have people who actually show up. I paused. You relocated us for your career. I'm relocating us for our family. There was a long silence. Then, you filed a complaint with the IG. I did. You're trying to destroy my career. Something rose in me that was not quite anger, not quite grief, something that had its own specific heat. You destroyed our marriage. You involved your career in our marriage by making it the permanent priority. You involved your subordinate in our marriage by sleeping with him. Your career is entangled with what you did. That's not something I manufactured. Donovan could lose his rank. Donovan should have thought about that before he started sleeping with a superior officer whose husband and children were 15 minutes away. I exhaled. And Renee deserved to know, Olivia. She's 7 months pregnant. The sound she made was something I won't describe. Not grief, exactly. More like the specific horror of consequences made real. The children stay, she said. You can't take them to Arizona without a court. Tom has the emergency custody filing. Temporary primary physical custody, pending full hearing. Given the documented circumstances, including your pattern of absence, the nature of the conduct violation, and the fact that I am the primary caregiver of record for the past 3 years, doctor's appointments, school enrollment, all in my name, all documented, Tom is confident. She started to cry again. Real tears this time. I could tell the difference now. I'm their mother, she said. You're their mother, I agreed. And you'll have visitation. A schedule. A real one, with dates you'll actually have to show up for, and consequences if you don't. I paused. I'm not taking them from you, Olivia. I'm protecting them from a version of life where their primary caregiver is also their only consistent parent, but is still somehow legally secondary. The silence stretched between us for a long time. I made a terrible mistake, she said finally. Quietly. The strategy was gone. Yes, I said. You did. I hung up. I looked at the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd stood with 2 wine glasses 3 weeks ago, expecting a life I thought I had, and I started packing. The IG investigation concluded faster than Tom anticipated. Fraternization cases, particularly when documented with timestamps and witness corroboration, moved efficiently through military channels. Sergeant Ray Donovan was busted down 1 rank. Captain Olivia Mercer received a formal reprimand placed in her permanent record and was passed over for the early major consideration she'd been tracking toward for 2 years. Her career path, which had been her North Star, her justification for every absence and every sacrifice she'd asked our family to make, was bent significantly off course. She didn't lose her job. I hadn't wanted that. But she felt the consequence in the way she understood consequences, professionally, in rank and trajectory and the assessment of peers. People in her unit knew. They didn't say it directly, but she told me later, in one of our terse co-parenting calls, that the atmosphere on base had changed. People looked at her differently. Donovan's wife, Renee, filed for divorce 2 weeks after I called her. She moved back to her parents in Virginia before the baby was born. A girl, I heard eventually. I closed on the Phoenix condo in late November. It was on the north side, close to Daniel's place, 10 minutes from my parents, 15 minutes from the school district my mother had spent a week researching for Caleb and Lily. 3 bedrooms, a yard big enough for their energy, and neighbors who brought over casseroles when we moved in. Caleb told me on the drive from Hartford that he was excited to have cousins nearby. Lily said she wanted a dog. I said maybe in the spring. It was the smallest, realest thing I'd said in months. The first few weeks in Phoenix were reconstruction work, not dramatic, not triumphant, just the quiet, effortful business of rebuilding routine. Getting the twins registered at their new school. Setting up their rooms. Finding a pediatrician. Learning which grocery store had the brand of cereal Lily refused to substitute and which park had the climbing structure Caleb liked. I was doing what I'd always done, except now I was doing it without the low-grade dread of a marriage that was failing, without the constant mental triage of making myself smaller so Olivia's world could be bigger. My mother came over 3 mornings a week and watched the kids while I put in full hours on the engineering consulting work, which I'd been building back toward my previous rate. Daniel helped me land 2 significant contracts through his network. By February, I was back to matching what I'd made before Connecticut. By April, I'd surpassed it. I started running again. For miles in the early morning before the twins woke up, through the neighborhood where I'd grown up, past the park where my father had taught me to ride a bike. Simple, repetitive, mine. I signed up for a half marathon in March and finished in 1 hour 52, which was better than I expected, and stood at the finish line with my hands on my knees feeling something I identified slowly as pride, not performance pride, not the kind that needed an audience, just the quiet confirmation that I was still capable of hard things. I went to therapy. Dr. Amara Hall, referred by Daniel, who'd seen her after his divorce 3 years prior. She did not let me get away with anything. She had a particular talent for identifying when I was narrating my pain in a way that kept me safely above it rather than actually feeling it, and she would simply wait, with a stillness that made the room feel very large, until I stopped performing and actually spoke. I told her about the wine glasses. I told her about the security footage. I told her about standing between the twins' beds at 2 in the morning listening to them breathe, anchored to the only thing that was unambiguously real. She said, "What did you need that night, Justin?" Not from Olivia. From yourself. I sat with that for a long time. The answer, when it came, was simple: I needed to trust my own perception. I'd spent years second-guessing what I saw because Olivia was so confident and capable that it had felt arrogant to doubt her. The affair hadn't just broken my marriage. It had confirmed a creeping suspicion I'd been suppressing for years, that I'd made myself invisible inside my own life. I was done being invisible. The co-parenting arrangement formalized in February through the court. Joint legal custody, primary physical with me, scheduled visitation with Olivia, 2 weekends per month, alternating holidays, 2 weeks in summer. She drove to Phoenix for the first visitation weekend in late January, stayed at a hotel on Camelback, and took the kids to the Desert Botanical Garden and a movie and a restaurant where Caleb ate his weight in macaroni. When she dropped them off Sunday evening, she stood on my porch for a moment before turning to go. "They seem happy," she said. It wasn't accusing. Just observed. "They are," I said. She nodded. Looked at the door. "You did right by them, Justin. You always did." She paused. "I'm sorry I took that for granted." I accepted the apology without inflating it. It was real, I thought. But apologies don't reconstruct things. They just acknowledge the rubble. "Drive safe," I said, and went inside. The encounter that I had not engineered but that came anyway happened in May, at Caleb and Lily's spring school showcase. I'd been talking to another parent, a woman named Christine, recently relocated from Austin, whose daughter was in Lily's class, when Olivia arrived, later than the start time. She'd driven in the night before and was staying at the same Camelback hotel. I watched her skin the auditorium, find the kids, and move toward them. She was in civilian clothes. She looked thinner. Tired around the eyes in a way that went past one bad night. She found me after the performance, when the kids were with my mother getting punch and cookies. "You look good," she said. She meant it, not as a compliment designed to hurt. Just factually. "I'm good," I said. Also factual. She looked at me the way people look at something they realize they miscategorized. "The reprimand is permanent," she said. "I won't make major before the standard gate, maybe not at all." "I know," I said. "I'm not happy about that, Olivia. I want you to know that. I didn't file the complaint to destroy you. I know why you filed it." She crossed her arms, more self-protective than defensive this time. Donovan's separation came through. From the army, not Renee, both. She exhaled. He's back in Alabama. Renee took the baby to Virginia. The whole unit knows. The last 4 months have been, she stopped. Hard, I said. Hard, she agreed. I thought about saying something more. Something that acknowledged the full picture, the complexity of who she'd been before the choices she'd made. But the auditorium was full of 5-year-olds waving crayon art at their parents, and my son was about to run over here covered in punch, and I didn't have any language left for the larger conversation that wasn't already settled. "Caleb was really good tonight," I said instead. "He memorized his whole part." She smiled, and for a moment it was entirely unguarded, entirely real, the Olivia from the pool at Derek's party. "He gets that from you," she said. "You always remembered everything." Caleb barreled into the space between us at exactly that moment, punch on his chin, waving his art project, and the conversation dissolved into the ordinary business of parenting, which is where it belonged. I don't think about her the way I used to. I don't mean that in the hard, closed-off way, I mean it as the natural consequence of having built something real in the space the grief vacated. My days are full in ways that have nothing to do with managing someone else's absence. The twins are thriving in ways that are measurable and daily. Lily qualified for the gifted reading program in April. Caleb joined a youth soccer league and scored his first goal on a Saturday morning while my parents went completely unhinged in the bleachers, and I stood there with my hands in my jacket pockets and felt something so clean and uncomplicated it took me a minute to name it. It was just happiness. No asterisk. I heard through mutual acquaintances, the specific social web that military communities maintain even across distance, that Olivia was being considered for a lateral transfer to a base in Georgia. A fresh start, professional rebuild. I felt nothing complicated about that. She was still their mother. She showed up for visitation consistently, and the kids were glad to see her, and she brought them home tired and fed and full of stories. Whatever she was rebuilding for herself professionally, she was showing up for them. I was watching that happen without resistance. That was the deal we'd made, the one that mattered. My father asked me once, about 8 months after everything, whether I regretted marrying her. I was quiet for a minute. We were sitting on his back porch in the early evening, one of those October nights in Phoenix when the heat finally relents and the sky goes a color that feels personally generous. "No," I said. And I meant it completely. She gave me those too. Everything else is just tuition. He laughed. Then he poured us both something from the bottle on the table, and we sat in the cooling dark and didn't talk for a while, and that was enough. Christine, the woman from the school showcase, texted me in June to ask if Lily and her daughter could have a play date. I said yes. We ended up all going to the botanical garden together on a Sunday, her daughter Emma, the twins, Christine, and me, and it was easy in the uncomplicated way that things are easy when nobody is performing. We got coffee after the kids wore themselves out and talked for 90 minutes about structural engineering in military towns and the specific texture of starting over in your mid-30s and whether the saguaro cacti were genuinely that tall or if they were a kind of collective hallucination Arizona ran as tourism. It was the most relaxed I'd felt in someone else's company in longer than I could calculate. We have had 5 Sunday outings since then. The kids request them by name. I am taking it slowly and deliberately and with clear eyes, the way you build things that are meant to last. Here is what I know now, from the far side of the worst year of my life: trust is not naivety and clarity is not coldness. I trusted Olivia because I chose to, and when she broke that trust, I chose something else. I chose to see it clearly, act on what I saw, protect my children, and then, harder than any of it, I chose to put down the weight of her choices and pick up my own life instead. The house sold for $535. The equity, properly documented, covered the Phoenix condo down payment with $12,000 left over, which is sitting in a college fund I opened for Caleb and Lily in January. My name is on the account. So is theirs. I am a structural engineer by training, and I think about structures constantly. What holds weight? What buckles under pressure? What looks solid until you look closely at the foundation? The marriage had fractures I'd plastered over for years because I thought the wall still looked fine from the outside. It wasn't fine. And tearing it down was the most painful thing I've ever done, and also, and this is the part one could not have predicted, the most clarifying. The twins got their dog in April. Her name, decided by committee after 3 weeks of heated debate, is Pickle. She sleeps between their beds. She is ridiculous and specific and entirely ours. Some evenings I sit on the back porch after the kids are in bed, Pickle at my feet, the desert cooling around me, and I take stock of what exists, the contracts, the school records, the photos on my phone of 2 5-year-olds at a soccer field with their grandfather losing his mind in the stands, the text thread with Christine about Sunday plans, my running shoes by the door. A life that is full of things I chose and things that chose me back. I don't look backward. Not from contempt, not from denial, but because there is so much forward that there isn't any reason to. Olivia chose her squad that night, on our anniversary, and drove past our street to do it. I chose mine too. I just took a little longer to figure out who they were. Now I know.